Hi everyone, welcome to this session. I'm Emma Connors. I'm the Southeast Asia correspondent for the Financial Review. I'm really talented and dedicated journalists. I'm speaking to you from across Asia, so this is a real sort of around the region trip. They're going to share with you how they work with others, both inside and across borders. I've worked mostly as a journalist in Australia, but also earlier in my career in the United Kingdom and US. And for the last 2 years, I've been focused on Asia, and I've got to say it's a really different place to be working. And I think it's just great that we have these people who are so skilled to give us a bit of an insight into what they do and how they do it. They really are breaking new ground. So I'll just briefly run down of how we're going to go this morning. Each of our panel will give about 5 minutes. They're going to talk about a particular collaboration, and then we'll move off into a general discussion. So first off the mark is Will Yang. Will is an investigative journalist for The Reporter in Taiwan. He covers topics about cross-border drug trafficking, human trafficking, and illegal fishing. Before he joined The Reporter, Will was a freelancer and he covered the Rohingya genocide for 2 years. Over to you, Will.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Hello, everyone. My name is Will Yang, and I'm an investigative journalist from The Reporter Taiwan. And today, I'm going to share with you a topic we have done in the late 2020. And it's about the methamphetamine drug supply chain in Southeast Asia and East Asia. And in this topic, we work together with Malaysia RAGE and Indonesian Tempo. And altogether, we released more than 10 Chinese Mandarin news article and one English and one English translated article, and also one English news video and one Chinese Mandarin news video. In the beginning of this topic, because I found there's a report on UNODC that in 2019, it mentioned Taiwan many times on the reports and specifically point out Taiwanese TOC are playing very significant role in this supply chain. And Taiwanese TOC stands for Transnational Organized Crime. And I try to find out what this Taiwanese TOC are playing in this significant role. And what is the significant role? By asking some law enforcement officer in Taiwan, in Japan, in Indonesia, and in Australia. And also we interviewed the UNODC researcher who wrote this report. And they provide me a big picture about this supply chain, because they told me that Taiwanese TOC are producing methamphetamine in the northern part of Myanmar together with the local rebels. And also the other role is Taiwanese TOC using a lot of Taiwanese fishing vessels to transport those amphetamine to Southeast Asia country and also to Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And after I realized this big picture, then I had to find the different countries partner to work with. So I cooperate with the news partner in Myanmar, Myanmar Now, and also Indonesia Tempo and Malaysia RAGE. And to start with this big topic, we have to narrow it down into certain cases. So I choose two cases which related to the country partner I choose. And one case is a Taiwanese TOC. They have a gang member who are arrested and jailed in the Myanmar. And also one fishing vessel's captain got arrested in Indonesia. And another case is two Malaysian teenagers was arrested in Taiwan. So within these two cases, I start to work with the partner in different countries. So we start two different signal chats. And actually before this cooperation start, it's before the pandemic. So in the beginning, I actually want to go to those countries, but after the pandemic, actually I cannot. So we have to rely on those online chat tool to share information and to update those progress, not only by weekly basis and sometimes even by daily basis. And within those, the information sharing, actually we can break the language barrier between those countries. For example, the partner in Myanmar, they can go to talk to the prisoner or the lawyer or maybe the police officer who handle these cases, and also Malaysia, also in Indonesia part. And for Taiwanese part, we can get those information and go to the prisoner, their hometown to talk to their friend, their family, or even the police officer who handle those cases to complete this whole story by those information sharing. So actually, under this pandemic outbreak, we, of course, in the beginning, we want to go to each other's country, but in the end, we cannot. But within those information sharing day by day or even weekly meeting, we can complete a quite decent cross-border report. And to sum up this, I think our tips is that in the beginning, I choose a cross-border case. And then I talk to those law enforcement officer and researcher, or maybe even scholar, to understand this big picture and what this supply chain looks like. And then we go to detail into the specific case and choose specific related countries partner to work with and start those workshop, like long-term workshop by Signal Chat, and to share those information to complete this very long-term cross-border investigation. Even though Myanmar partner didn't have their story release under this pandemic outbreak, but actually with those experience of cooperation, we think in the future we can also work on this same case, the drug smuggling case, because this supply chain is not died down yet. So in the future, we can also work on those experience and knowledge. Okay, thank you very much. This is my sharing.
Terrific, thanks, Will. Yeah, and certainly those stories are going to keep running for a while, so I'm sure you'll be tapping into those contacts. And yeah, I'd love to come back to you and talk a bit more about the use of Signal and which app you like, but perhaps at the end. So our second speaker is Juan Kim from the Korea Center for Investigative Journalism, NewsTapa, which is a non-profit investigative newsroom based in Seoul. Since Joan joined NewsTapa, she's been working on different cross-border reporting projects with media organisations across the world, including Tanza in Japan, and NDR of Germany, and of course the GIJC. So over to you, Joan.
Hi, my name is Ji-yoon. I'm from KCIJ from South Korea. I'd like to make presentation this morning about our transnational project done with GECO project, Monga Bay, Al Jazeera, English. This joint report was about a Korean chaebol company called Korindo, which is based in Indonesia. And then our focus was that this Korean chaebol company, which means transnational conglomerate based in Indonesia, and its management bought the West Papuan rainforest from the indigenous people in fraudulent terms. And this company has harmed the forest environment twice as well. As the owner family of Korindo are all South Koreans who started the mother company of Korindo in South Korea in the 1950s, NewsTapa took the role of gathering information, like basic information about the individuals and business itself. So I heavily devoted my time to provide foreign partners with the historical context of the company and the owner family. I spent time collecting old news archives from the 1950s through the 70s and on in gathering information about key business moments of this owner family by digging into autobiographies written by the owners, and as well as old interviews done by Korean local media. So I translated and then toast that major facts to foreign partners. And then another important part from the home country, from our side, was that gathering information about the owner family and key management regarding their legal status, if there was any legal feud in South Korea, because these people still maintain South Korean nationality. They spent quite a long time in Korea while doing business in Indonesia, maybe via online. So I try to check if there's any lawsuits or like both personally and business-wise. In fact, the owner chairman, this guy was in a major legal feud with the Korean tax authority regarding tax dodging. So it was quite meaningful for us to dig in. And then I got a lot of help from the Korean lawyers from the opposite side. And then our final important task was to collect all information about the mother company and its affiliates in Korea, to know if the owner who resides both in South Korea and Indonesia profit out of his directorship from Korean companies. For this, I collected corporate information from the corporate registry, from South Korean government and financial authorities database. So it was quite easy to access from South Korea, but I mean, from the access to information is quite different from country to country. So it may be different, but it was really important for us to gather all these basic information from the home country so that the size or the domain of investigation gets wider if you gather basic information from the home country. That really helped. This is about it. And thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, June. So interesting. Once again, I'd like to come back and ask you a bit more about, matching up the records across different countries, but perhaps at the end of the session. So our next speaker is coming to you from Jakarta. This is Dini Pramiti. Dini is one of two speakers from Tempo today. For those of you who don't know Tempo, it's probably one of the best known Indonesian news sites, publishes in both English and Indonesian Bahasa. Dini is an investigative reporter at Tempo magazine. She focuses mainly on socio-humanitarian and environmental issues, and she's published reports on a real variety of topics, including illegal abortion drugs, deforestation, very much in the news this week. And she also co-wrote an award-winning piece on male and female Islamic preachers who are spreading messages of peace and tolerance. Over to you, Dini.
Hi all. Good morning. It's a bit earlier here in Indonesia. Let me introduce myself. I'm Judith Pramita, and I currently write for Tempo magazine on Korea's issues, like Emma said before. However, this time I will be presenting the story I wrote about digital sex crime in Indonesia, collaborating with South China Morning Post, the Korea Times, Philippines Center for Investigative Journalism, and ABS-CBN Manila. And I have to thank Raquel from South China Morning Post to gather all of us and make this project happen. So this project started from when Raquel contact us. We immediately agreed that this issue is crucial one, and people need to be more aware about it, about the digital sex crime. Then we started to create a strategy for the reporting work, we first had to find who to talk to, gather all the evidence or findings we obtained from sources, and eventually deciding that the victims take our utmost priority for this story to be impactful, and then take all of that into a journalistic piece that we can learn from. This is really important in Indonesia because the situation is very critical here. Victims are criminalized and prosecuted for the abuse of their intimate content. The absence of law protecting victims contribute to the rising number of cases day by day. And we believe there are more cases than what is being reported because many who are victimized are women and children who fear the legal and social consequences of filing a report. And if you had my presentation, if you have my slides, I wrote about the data from the records of the National Commissions on Violence Against Women, which is the first national commission that I talked to. And they monitor the cases day by day. They also have a service that handles victims. And this organization also has a great connection with other Indonesian organizations that fight for the same cause. And the data show us that the cases is skyrocketed from year to year. In 2018, there are about 90 cases, and it rising up to 100 times in 2020. So, and the difficult things which make it even heavier is the digital security situation in Indonesia is also very worrying as this flourishes what causes the digital sexual crime. Like in general, Indonesia very lacks digital security literacy as it is shown in the types of cases that arise. And what is very worrying is the young age of victims who are stuck in online social media grooming and sexting. And after our story was published, one of our readers said to us that their 10-year-old relative fell victims to this type of crime. And we also learned that when we are looking into what was going on behind all of this and whether there is a major business driving it, we gathered the pieces of the puzzle and got our initial presumption that was the main driver of this story. We decided to focus on investigating and revealing the business. Everything became clearer as cases started to grow with various types of cases. There is a vicious cycle here. The business is flourishing because of the lack of from a set of laws that protect the victims. Low digital literacy amidst the bad digital security has helped skyrocket the number of cases. If you're wondering how does this business work, I can say that this business work from intimate contents that land in the hands of the perpetrators and eventually gets monetized. The first way they are able to obtain and steal people's intimate contents is by trapping and manipulating the victims to hand over or actually lure them to create the intimate contents. Secondly, is through hacking and recording an activity without the victims even knowing. And the third way is by consensually recording their intimate moments with a partner they are having relationship with, but would use the contents to threaten, blackmail, and intimidate their former partners after the relationship fails. Reflecting on the three aspects, if someone asks who the suspects are, I would say it starts from the people you already know and all the way to complete strangers. And perpetrators motivated by? And yeah, it is purely business. A small portion of them are motivated by vengeance. However, we avoid the use of the term revenge porn, and in Indonesia's case, focus on its business aspect. After researching for about 3 months, interviewing many people in the process, we were able to identify a structure and establish a case building. We found these two social platforms as the most popularly used by many perpetrators to prey on their victims and generate billions of rupiah. It is Twitter because it is a two-sided platform, a place to trap victims and also a place to sell and over internet contents. And the Telegram, because customer are from Twitter, customer are then escorted to Telegrams or other special apps. The one thing that I want to bold here is many of the victims report their ordeal while sundown. Whatever the case, they all share something in common: trauma. Nearly all victims show deep trauma. I had resources who had their non-consensual internet content spread to other countries. Their trauma are marred by various regulations that box them into a corner. This is why we feature a special coverage about the victims' voices in hopes to help them get the fair legal protection. Another underlying aspect on reporting about this issue is consent and victim safety. We don't explicitly narrate the victim's ordeal for sensuality. We had to cancel publishing a story about a witness who is a non-celebrity after we weighed in our source safety. And our story so far become reference from Indonesian non-profit organization. Many people start to speak up about similar experience to members of our team involved in forming this story. I think this is the positive effects from this project, and making it the collaboration across the country make it wider. We have a broader audience, and this is good for us because our victims' voices become stronger.
Thanks a lot, Dini. That I think really cuts to what a cross-border collaboration can extend the reach of those voices, which is so important in such an important story. And maybe we can come back to that, and we'll probably also hear a little bit more from Raquel. Our next speaker is Annelies. Annelies Gisbert is based in Tokyo, so we're off to Tokyo, where she works in the investigative newsroom of TANSA. In addition to the investigation into coal power that she's going to talk about today, Annelies has participated in the Oceans Inc. investigation coordinated by the Environmental Reporting Collective, as well as the CumEx Files investigation led by German Media Corrective. Over to you, Annelies.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Emma. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be able to speak with you today. Just to say a little bit more about myself, I am an American, but I've lived in Japan for the past 5 years, and I've been working with TANSA for the past 2. So I'd like to share. So today I'd like to talk about how lawyers helped me investigate coal power in Japan. And what I learned through this investigation, although it's probably obvious, but lawyers are incredible investigators themselves, and they really shared a lot of their findings with me and shaped the story overall. So first of all, I'd just like to mention that in the past, Tanza has previously collaborated in 2018 with Tempo in Indonesia and with KCIJ Newstapa in South Korea to investigate harm caused to local communities by the Cirebon coal plant in Indonesia. And this coal plant was financed by Japanese and South Korean institutions. So the Cirebon investigation took the form of multiple newsrooms investigating how actors from multiple countries are involved in a single issue. So in this case, one specific coal-fired power plant. So then the next round of our coal investigation, which took place over this past year, sort of took a different form. Journalists from 6 countries conducted separate investigations of coal power in our respective countries, but we periodically updated each other on our progress. And so using this sort of like loose collaborative approach, we were able to see some sort of big picture connections in the region. Specifically, what was interesting for me was that even though Japan and South Korea often see each other or see themselves as being very dissimilar from each other, our energy situations are quite similar. So I think there is a lot we can learn from each other and probably a lot more material for future investigations there. But so to talk about the story I worked on for this investigation, I focused on a coal-fired power plant that is currently under construction in the city of Yokosuka, which is sort of near Tokyo on Tokyo Bay. Once this coal plant comes online, fully online in 2024, the plant will emit about 7.26 million tons of CO2 per year. And for reference, that's about 4 times the total emissions of Yokosuka city itself. Just a bit more information on Japan and coal. Japan still plans for coal power to make up 19% of its energy mix in the year 2030. But so in the city of Yokosuka, where this new plant is being built, residents who are concerned about the plant's contribution to the climate crisis have sued the Japanese government to stop the plant. They hope to do this by getting the government's approval for the plant's environmental impact assessment revoked. So without the approval of the impact assessment, construction cannot continue. So aside from coal being just bad for the environment in general, my investigation used findings by lawyers to highlight exactly sort of some of the lengths that Japan's utilities and the Japanese government will go to continue using coal power. But maybe if you're doing your own coal investigation, but you don't have friendly lawyers to talk to, maybe you can replicate some of the things they did, because my investigation is really standing on their shoulders. So part of the Yokosuka lawsuit targets a serious misrepresentation in the coal plant's environmental impact assessment. The assessment claims that the new plant will actually reduce CO2 emissions by replacing an old, inefficient power plant that was at the same location. And by quote unquote reducing emissions, the utility was allowed to conduct a simplified environmental impact assessment. However, this old plant that was being replaced was in a long-term shutdown. So in other words, it was not emitting any CO2 or any other emissions at all. So this chart that you see in my presentation is from the plant's environmental impact assessment, and it compares the old plant's annual greenhouse gas emissions with the new plant's. So new one on the right, old one on the left. So you can see 7.26 million tons compared with 10.66 million tons. So then another key point in this chart is that it says the emission rates are calculated for both plants if both plants were running at 85% utilization rate. And like I said, the old plant was at 0 utilization. But so based on that, the residents who are suing the government, their legal team investigated exactly when the old plant had emitted the level of CO2 written in the impact assessment. So the lawyers used historical utilization rate data And they found that the old plant had only had most recently run with an 85% utilization rate in the early 1970s. So in other words, that's 50 years before the new plant would come online. So the data that these lawyers used as a reference is compiled by the government, and in fact, by the same government agency that was responsible for approving the new coal plant. So basically what this means is that both the government and the utility, of course, they had the data saying that the old plant had not emitted the same level of CO2 for the past 50 years, but the government said nothing and approved the plant anyway. So that was sort of the specifics that I highlighted in my that I highlighted in one of my articles. But I also tried to bring a sort of global perspective to this story about the coal plant and the lawsuit challenging it. So now I'd like to talk a bit about how lawyers outside of Japan, specifically, I talked to lawyers from the Netherlands and from South Korea, how they helped me frame Japan's coal use and frame this lawsuit. So around the world, climate litigation has often been successful in making governments acknowledge the insufficiency of their own climate policies. And one common thread through a lot of climate litigation is the world's dwindling carbon budgets. And you can sort of see carbon budgets in this graph on the right, showing that the further we delay reducing emissions, the sooner we'll have to make drastic cuts to get to zero if we want to not exceed a given global temperature rise. So yeah, sort of like I just said, the concept of carbon budgets, which I assume you are familiar with, probably. I wasn't super familiar with them when I started this project. But basically carbon budgets, like I said, refer to the amount of CO2 we're able to emit before exceeding a given level of warming. So when I started researching these topics, in particular, I found that the idea of evaluating a country's climate policies based on remaining carbon budgets was relatively unfamiliar in Japan outside of maybe environmental groups. So I thought it was important to highlight this point in my articles. Because the lack of space in our remaining carbon budgets is the whole reason why it's too dangerous to build new coal-fired power plants, right? And so when I spoke to lawyers overseas who are involved in climate litigation, they emphasized the importance of short-term emission reductions. And from these interviews, I knew I needed to introduce readers in Japan to the concept of carbon budgets. And because I hope that my work will empower readers, not just make them feel depressed about the climate crisis, I knew I had to link the Yokosuka climate case to successful climate litigation around the world. And even though in Japan, Japan hasn't yet seen a successful climate case, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. So to summarize, both lawyers both in Japan and overseas helped shape my reporting by sharing the results of their own investigations, and also by helping me see the answer to the all-important question, why does it matter? So thank you. That's the end of my presentation. Tansa doesn't have a paywall, so if you're curious to read these stories, please just head over to our website. Yeah, thank you again.
Thanks very much, Annalise. I've read all of those stories and I highly recommend them. And I also think but even though I had read them, I didn't know that the lawyers she had reached were outside of the country. So there you go. Our next speaker is Ian Yee. Ian is a journalist, documentary producer, and executive director, and we are now off to Malaysia. Kuala Lumpur, I think, is where Ian is.
That's right.
Yeah. So he's a very interesting character, Ian, from my brief look at his bio. He didn't set out to be a journalist, but somehow ended up not just being a journalist, but also a producer and co-founder of the investigative and impact media startup, The Fourth. Over to Ian.
Hi, everyone. So today I'm here in my capacity as the executive director of the Environmental Reporting Collective, or the ERC. And I'm going to just talk about the first project that we did, actually, which started with this little guy. We named him Randy. Long story short, he was a pangolin that was about to be trafficked. And some of the journalists that we were working with in Malaysia So obviously the ERC is a quite a global network of journalists who are all investigating environmental crimes. But our partners in Malaysia were able to find this little guy. And this is us, this is them, and I was part of that team as well, just full disclosure. This was us releasing him back into the wild, and we'll get to that. So the reason why we were working on this is because pangolins like Randy are often skinned and killed for their scales, which is said to have medicinal properties, which obviously it does not. It's basically the same as our fingernails, right? It's just keratin. And that's why, because of that, because of just this human desire to, just to make use of whatever resources we have. And because of that, pangolin seizures, pangolin trafficking was really spreading. And this is actually a map that's taken from the website for this project, which you can go check out after this. So obviously it's a massive, massive problem, including here in Malaysia where I live. Pangolins used to be quite commonly found in the forest, and now they're almost completely gone. In fact, that's part of the reason why pangolin smuggling is spreading throughout the rest of the region, because there's just not enough local populations left, and it starts becoming a very transnational crime, where these pangolins are moved across borders in order to go to the main market, which is in China and other Chinese populations around the world. So we started off by just asking one simple question: how can we save pangolins like Randy? Without collaborative investigations, that would have been very, very difficult. Number one, because there'll be inadequate funding or resources. There are very, very few media organizations. I know they are, but definitely, probably not in our region. Very few of them could fund a 12-country investigation, because that's where we kind of saw a lot of the pangolins moving around in countries where obviously pangolins are endemic, but also where we know that there's a lot of trafficking going on. Number two, transnational crimes obviously need transnational reporting, right? For example, when we were doing the reporting here in Malaysia, we needed someone in Thailand to tell us what was going on the other side of the border. Obviously, we could travel there, we could find a fixer, but nothing beats getting a local reporting partner who has an understanding of the landscape. And obviously, that went on and on into Myanmar, into Vietnam, and also in China. So what the ERC was able to do is help a lot of these journalists who had an interest in pangolin reporting, but just couldn't take on that scope because it's so huge, didn't have the resources. We were able to help them fill those gaps in reporting through collaborative investigation. And finally, without collaborative investigation, we wouldn't have much impact. Unfortunately, I feel it this way, but I don't know if it's the same everywhere else, but at least in Malaysia, stories by international media sometimes don't have quite the same impact as local media. In fact, sometimes it could have the opposite effect. It can actually create this type of resistance in local population, local communities that are like, oh, you don't get to tell us what we do. So it's always good to have localized partners who understand, again, the local landscape and context in order to effectively deliver the story in a way that gets impact from partners. But with collaborative investigation, just by the simple act of us bringing a lot of different reporters from different countries to work on this pangolin project, what we can do, number one, is we can co-fund stuff, right? Partnering newsrooms only have to cover their own costs most of the time. If there's any like extraordinary travel expenses or investigative expenses, the ERC can actually help fund that. Number two, we get to co-publish the work. All the content that we do at ERC is available to absolutely everyone. So you get a wealth of material that you can adapt for your respective publications. Number three, we get high impact. When stories are really, really localized, and the partnering newsrooms, they use their long-standing connections with civil society, with sometimes even government and officials in government. You are able to have a much stronger impact with that story. So in the end, the story kind of looked like this. It is a really nice interactive website that was built. Please go check it out. If you just Google pangolin reports, it'll definitely come out. So like we had all those interactive maps that you saw earlier. And I got to show this because this is what we did here in Malaysia. With the wealth of content that we had, the ERC had helped us collect from across the region on this issue, we were able to come up with this interactive investigative storybook, is what we called it, at least. It's a mouthful, but we wanted to do something a bit different. And based on our conversations with civil society and conservationists here in Malaysia, what they were telling us was that we need to start with a more educational approach. We need to start targeting younger audiences and informing them about that, because the previous approach of trying to convince the older generations not to use traditional Chinese medicine and pangolin scales, as kind of like an alternative treatment, that has never worked. So now start with education, and hopefully within a few years, that is going to start shifting patterns and shifting mindsets. So we created this beautiful cartoon character called Rainy. Long story again, but it's another pangolin we saved. And we also were able to get video content from different parts of the world. So for this one was something that we shot here in Malaysia again, showing one of our journalists going undercover to buy a pangolin. And what we realized is when we buy a pangolin here, instead of the seller never meets you directly, right? He always just coordinates on his phone, just purely through WhatsApp. And I think, yeah, like transnational crimes, they have lots of like collaborative tools as well that really, really insulate them from law enforcement. So what they do is they just manage the transaction, and after that, they take the pangolin, pass it to a bus driver in a box. The bus driver doesn't know what's in there, and they just tell the bus driver, deliver it to this person that you'll see at the bus stop. That's it. So yeah, so we're able to get footage like that from around the world. And our latest project, which was just released a month ago, was Oceans Inc., where we again worked together over 12 countries all throughout the pandemic, which was obviously a lot of fun. No delays at all, but it was basically looking into environmental crimes in the fishing industry in particular. So we looked into forced labor, deaths at sea, and so on and so forth. And we actually worked with Will from the Reporter, we worked with Tempo, we worked with Tanza on this as well. So this is what the website looks like. Please go check it out. So what we do with reporting is you can see all the logos of all the partners who worked on it are here. And I'm going to talk a bit more about why that's important. So a bit on my tip sheet, collaborative journalism 101, I guess. Number one, share content. I know it sounds simple, it sounds like a no-brainer, but it's really, really hard to let go of a scoop, especially in places where the landscape is a bit more competitive. We have to kind of internalize this principle of sharing content. So in the ERC, everything is on a Creative Commons license. Everybody gets to have everything. So it just removes all doubt, removes all sense of competition, makes things just a bit easier to do. And again, it also helps when people want to amplify the content after that. Number two, share credit, especially when you win awards like we did. Humble brag, no big deal. But obviously, it's not just so that people, because it really is, again, important to a lot of organizations that need spotlighting of their work, that needs this type of recognition in order to get more funding, in order to get more support. Number three, share skills. So a lot of the different collaborators and partners that you will work with on collaborative journalism, they will have different strengths, probably some weaknesses as well, and you want to complement each other as best as you can. So we had people who were really good at video production here in Malaysia. We had people who were really good at investigative work, like raw investigative work in other parts of the world. We had some data journalists, and like again in Canada and India, who were contributing their skills. So when we put that all together, we have a really, really well-rounded report, like what you see with the pangolin reports, as well as Oceans Inc. And number four, I think just like what Annalise said earlier as well, you don't want to just be all doom and gloom, right? Think about solutions, think about impact, and that just allows your journalism to have a much more localized impact, if that makes sense. So for example, with pangolin reports, it actually triggered a corruption probe here where both the police as well as the immigration department started looking into how police officers and immigration and border patrol officers were involved in the smuggling. Lessons I've learned, I'm not going to cover this because I don't have much time here, but I'm also going to be covering this in a later session today with YU. So just shameless plug, I'll talk about this later. This is kind of the model that we have. It starts with the ERC, and we want to empower partner newsrooms to look into environmental investigations, and they can then empower their journalists to do the same, or their freelancers. And their freelancers and their journalists obviously work with civil society and other impact partners, and that ultimately hopefully translates into some type of action in the community. So how can we collaborate? The the easiest thing you can do is just take our content. It's all free. It's all out there. If you want to do something, you want to adapt the pangolin reports into something localized, go for it. But another way you can do it is through, we have two types of grants that we're giving out right now, a collaborative reporting grant as well as a training grant. Now is not the time for more shameless plugs, so I'm just going to leave it at that. If you want to find out more, go to our website. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Ian. That's great. I really, just to draw one point in what was a lot of information, I really like the emphasis on how localized content and local media can get the message across often more than international media, who the governments can find it easier to ignore sometimes. Perhaps we can come back to that at some point. Okay, our next speaker is Nana Rizki. So Nana's one of Dini's colleagues at Tempo. She's also in Jakarta, and Nana is head of multimedia at Tempo, which is fantastic and something a bit different. She produces multi-platform content, including videos, podcasts, photos. Her work spans research, pre-production, post-production, and she also produces documentaries. So over to you, Nana. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Emma. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nana. I am from Tempo, based in Jakarta, Indonesia. I hope you all well and healthy in this pandemic, a long pandemic, and still eager to follow me in this quick presentation. So I want to present to you about the coal dilemma in Indonesia. I will share screen. Tempo presenting the coal dilemma in Indonesia. We are very aware of the energy crisis around us, and this is a collaborative story project who representing about how a coal impact in the environment, also in the health. We are very aware of the energy crisis around us, and replacing fossil fuel has never been easy. And the industry has been so massive that it takes more than just your and hundreds of efforts to do it. And regardless, it is how it is harmful the usage is to us, to our family, and to our environment and to our future. And the danger of coal is experienced both environmental and health departments. And Tempo took the angles about the health impact for the villagers near the PLTU, or the landfill of fly ash and bottom ash. Health-wise, coal dispose might affect the pollution in the air. Survey by WHO it states that at least 5 diseases contributed to the death from air pollution in Indonesia. There are lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and until stroke. So it's very dangerous to the villagers, impact the fly ash and bottom ash near, and this complication from the environmental to health. Coal has done so much damage, yet the increase was in areas from B3 category by the government in 2021, I mean. So Tempo create a magazine coverage and an interactive storytelling and investigative documentary video to spread and gain attention of those in power to change in this condition and make a better decisions. So we trace the fact. We conduct our investigation to place in Cilacap, Rembang, Jepara, and Cirebon. We still do the filming in this pandemic era, it was risky to travel, but we had to do this to filming and to reporting because we made the video. We must to get a visual and audio, and fortunately, with strict health protocol, we managed to film it safely. And the tricky part of this reportage was to film from the inside the plants or in the landfill. Restrictions everywhere, and they were naturally resistant to journalists in Indonesia. However, I and Sim was be able to persuasive enough to convince them that I was reporting about their faba management, which they claimed more environmentally friendly. But while the company representative said that their waste management has been environmentally friendly, the fact it flew the residential area, harming people with respiratory illness and dirtying their house or burning their farms. In the reporting, we also collaborate with local NGO like Walhi and Greenpeace Indonesia to get more data. We get a data that protest against fly ash and bottom ash in various places in Indonesia, especially in Central Java. Jokowi removed coal waste from B3 category, and fly ash, bottom ash, or faba were dumped in giant ponds in Cilacap, Rembang, Jepara, and Cirebon. And with the magazine, with the interactive website, and with the video, we hope we can representing the residents' voice like Sadinem. Sadinem is a villager in Wilang village in the Cilacap. She explains to me that the fly ash and bottom ash visit the residential area in the dry season. She has a grandson who suffers from upper respiratory infection since he was just an infant due to breathing the dust from stream power plant operation. And Sadinem said that Sadinem don't want faba to dump near the environment again because her concern are the people from the forum with the jaringan anti fly ash and bottom ash in Cilacap, with the law that exclude faba from the category. Sadinem was very worrying about the landfill has impacted to their grandson. And also we also interviewing and with Mrs. Sriana, a farmer from Jepara, who experienced a bad odor with cysts in the field and had her farm burnt from the scorching hot coal ash. The stream power plant near her village has lack in and the Sriana say the plant was burned because the ash were so hot and scorching hot and fishy smell. It smells so fishy in around the field. And also the other facts is about Watira, a Winong villagers also who has her house dirtied by the fly ash. Moreover, she said the water in her village tastes weird, and only when it's raining, the taste become bitter. She has a husband. The Watira husband has a chronic lung disease and cannot no longer walk. With those people, we empathize and realize this investigation. I realized this one was a quiet journey, but I really doubt that it will be the last. However, I truly hope that this work called impact those who suffered in silence. And I hope other collaboration will capture our other story to help villagers' voices. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Raquel, who's Asia correspondent for, I'm sure you all know, the South China Morning Post. She's got more than a decade experience covering Asia, and I'm really interested to hear what she has to say. So over to you, Raquel.
Hi, Emma. Thank you very much. I would like to share my screen with you. Here we go. So I am going to talk about a collaboration on digital sex crimes in Asia. Dini from Tempo already shared a bit about this investigation. It was a collaboration between 5 news organizations based in Hong Kong, South Korea, the Philippines, and Indonesia. We focus on issues like image-based abuse of women, online sexual exploitation of children, and sextortion. Getting funding for this project was essential. We learned later last year that we would receive support from JNI, and then we worked on this project for about 6 months. Each newsroom started working on their own stories, but we shared materials such as interviews, transcriptions, and contacts. We also discussed how to handle this issue in a sensitive way. For instance, we agreed to avoid the term revenge porn throughout the entire project, because even though it may be a catchy term and do well on Google search, experts say that it fails to highlight the impact on survivors. So we decided to take a more of an ethical approach. We at SMP published 3 long features as a result of this collaboration. The first story was focused on the growing number of cases involving women who see their intimate images being released by ex-partners, friends, and acquaintances. The story delved into the role of non-consensual images within the traditional porn industry. Then we ran a second story, which was focused on the online groups sharing non-consensual content of women and abusive images of children. For this piece, I monitored about 20 Telegram groups for several months. The third story was focused on sextortion syndicates in the Philippines and in some countries in Africa, which have made millions from victims in places like the UK. We looked into the role of social media networks, wire transfer services, and cryptocurrencies. But the anchor of this story was a series of Interpol operations that took place in the Philippines after a Scottish teenager killed himself. So having partners in the Philippines was very helpful, and this collaboration really allowed to show how pervasive these issues are. So we conducted dozens of interviews for this project. When it comes to victims in particular, we were able to interview about 20 survivors in about 10 different countries, both in Asia and Europe. And again, that was only possible because there were several newsrooms working together, and we were also working with freelancers based in other countries. We found some of the survivors via online platforms like social media, and others through support workers, advocates, scholars, lawyers, and nonprofits. Documents were also important. For instance, for our story about sextortion, there were a number of Interpol documents that were available online, and also old press releases from different police forces in the Philippines, which were quite useful to piece things together. So do check the police online archives and their social media platforms, because old posts may have names, locations, and numbers that are important for your investigations. I would also recommend finding out the right keywords. For instance, when investigating online sexual exploitation of children or violence against women, it is useful to look up terms in different languages because a lot of these content may be hidden. In addition, to social media, online help forums, and Reddit threads can also be helpful, and of course, court cases. As you may expect, one of the main challenges of this project was the fact that we had to strike a fine balance between gathering all the information we needed and making sure that we were sensitive and showed respect for the victim's trauma. So I would say that an important first step is to be considerate and avoid victim blaming. Make sure that survivors are comfortable with what they are sharing, and be careful about publishing details that can identify or further expose them. Also think about visuals, excuse me. For this project, I worked closely with our graphic artist, Leslie, so we could come up with visual elements that represented survivors in a dignified manner and help to smash stereotypes. Finally, I would say avoid sensational and clickbait headlines. As I mentioned, we try to do that by not using the term revenge porn, for instance. And I will wrap up this conversation because I'm losing my voice by talking about other challenges we faced. There were some security concerns, for instance, when approaching people who were engaging in sextortion. We also had to take precautions while monitoring Telegram groups. As you know, activists who previously went undercover were cyberbullied and had their personal information shared online. So in that regard, my advice would be don't join several groups at the same time because the administrators and some of the members may be the same. Change your username every few days. Make sure that your mobile number is hidden. Conducting sensitive interviews and going through hundreds of disturbing images over several months can be traumatic. You may also face online abuse after the stories are published. So, as a final note, I would like to highlight the need to give yourself time to process sensitive content and talk about your mental health. That's it from me. I would like to give a shout out to all the reporters who took part in this collaboration. You can see in these photos, Min Young from South Korea, Neil from the Philippines, and Dini, who is here with us today. I'm sharing the Twitter handles of the news outlets involved, and of course, feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Raquel. I hope you followed those tips on mental health yourself. It sounds like it would have been a harrowing investigation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving into the Q&A session now. Can I ask all the speakers to go off mute? Because I'm just going to ask you just to speak up if you think you want to, okay? We'll just see how it goes. I've got one very basic practical question that I'd like to get your views on, which is the best method of communication, okay? So we've all been in various forms of lockdown. Which apps do you prefer and why? I mean, I was on WhatsApp with a few projects and then we had to shift to Signal, and then a couple of people prefer Telegram. Anyone got any strong views on this one, particularly cross-border collaboration?
Okay, I can comment on this just based on my personal experience. Slack is obviously the thing that everyone's using right now, right?
Yeah.
I think these platforms are great. I just think we need to spend more time on onboarding people, especially if you're working on a collaborative basis, because there are different people from different parts of the world. They use different apps. For example, WhatsApp, we know that in certain countries they use Line, they use different things. So it might not be immediately kind of intuitive for them. Slack in particular has kind of high barrier of entry. Not everybody uses it. It's great, obviously. So I think that's the first thing I'll bear in mind is consider what everyone's using and find the best solution based on that. Obviously, there are some that have more security, kind of like functions like Signal and Telegram. So that's something to consider as well. But at the end of the day, if the rest of them don't know how to use it or can't use it, then it's pointless. So you just got to make sure that there is that onboarding process, which is really important.
Yeah, That's very good advice. I personally hate Slack, but can't avoid it because the whole company runs on it. So, you know.
Yeah.
Anyone else on that one? Or should we move on? My next question is about how do you guys go about accessing official records in different jurisdictions? You know, obviously there's huge language barriers here. So I guess that's where working with other media groups helps. But I know, Jion, you've done a lot of document searching. Have you got any particular tips?
Obviously, in each country, like reporters would know best about their own countries, but accessing public data of other countries, it's oftentimes really tricky. So I'd like to share my favorite website, which I learned from GIJC a few years ago. It's an OCCRP catalog of research databases. I'll share the link in the chat also, but it's really well organized by countries and types of documents, like corporate documents, all kinds of directory, gazettes, land data, all the trade data, like everything is well organized. So I think this website will be the must go to start investigations. Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone from OCCRP here, I'd like to thank you for building this up. Yeah, it's really, really, really useful.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I'd certainly like to have a look. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, for my own experience, yeah, I think just like everyone else, to work with the other reporter, and the local reporter know the best of their own situation, and they probably have their own access to maybe some officer or some department they know, and because we are cooperating in the same group, so we can translate into English for each other. I think that's probably the best. And also because sometimes you can find some information you do not know in your homeland, but they do have in, for example, there's one Taiwanese prisoner got in the jail in Myanmar, and we found their home address, which that the officer don't want to give to us in Taiwan. So it's sometimes tricky. You can find this information in other countries.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, so that's how you tracked him down from Myanmar. Yeah. Wow, that is cool. And Lisa, I have one question for you. You mentioned, so obviously you work with lawyers in different countries, but I'm just wondering if you've done any work with US media. You know, do they have any relevance to any of the work you've done? I guess that sort of plays to the point that Ian made about the importance of local media and how international media is sometimes easier for government and policymakers to ignore. So I'm just wondering about your experience. It's not just about the US, but I guess just to sort of enlarge upon Ian's point about, working with international media.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of experience working with US media, but on the Oceans Inc. investigation that Tansa participated in, the lead of that investigation was Mangabe, which, although it has reporters located around the world, I think it is based or headquartered in the US. And then the head of the project was an American who was just in the US for the entirety of the investigation, I believe. But actually, to the point about I don't know, a country or a community accepting or rejecting reporting based on who reports it. Sometimes in Japan, there's actually the opposite effect where if the international media reports a story, then the Japanese local media or local politicians, etc., can no longer ignore it. And we saw that a lot with reporting about the Olympics. I think international media often were the first to pick up and really emphasize a lot of the scandals in the lead up to the Olympics, such as the sexist comments by the former head of the organizing committee, etc. And then that forced a change in the committee, and forced a change in the situation in Japan. So I think maybe it's not a blanket rule that the local communities won't accept foreign media. I think you just have to be smart and think about what would be most effective in terms of who shares the story, and probably a combination of both might work the best in some cases.
Sure. Raquel, I've just got a quick question for you. I think we've got just 2 minutes left, but I'm just interested in how particularly digital sex crimes obviously doesn't know international borders. So do you think that working as a collaborative team across borders enabled you to have more impact?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think covering sex digital crimes really requires to have partners in different countries. Because, for instance, the example I gave about sextortion rings, many of these gang leaders are based in a country and are targeting victims elsewhere. So I think being able to share information was essential. And at the same time, I think that every partner felt that our work have like more weight because it was obviously an international effort. It wasn't just one news outlet saying that this is a problem. It was like 5 different news outlets highlighting that this is an issue that deserves more attention. So yeah, I think the collaboration was really an essential part to do like comprehensive coverage and present something that highlights how pervasive these crimes are.
Okay, well, I guess that's sort of a nice note to end on, really, because this session was all about collaboration, and I think what you have all reminded of today is, a collaboration can really mean your work packs a much bigger punch. So, and certainly I just like to say that the collaborations in Asia are much stronger than what I've seen in other regions. So congratulations to you all, and particularly Tempo, which seems to be at the middle of just about everything in the region. So great job, guys. Thanks very much.